Hey guys, this is Red and Blue, and we have our opponents for the group phase of the Champions League. The draw is just over, so we know who we're gonna face to start defending our second Champions League trophy and potentially aim for the three-peat. We're gonna be facing, in order, Barcelona in the Parc des Princes, Man City in the Etihad, AS Roma in Paris, Aston Villa in Villa, Galatasaray in Paris, Villarreal in Spain in the Ceramica, Bratislava in the Parc des Princes, and Com in Italy. Overall, let's talk about the draw, let's talk about the opponents. I'll share you my thoughts, and you can let me know in the comment what you think of it. I think, in general, I've got to be honest, I think on paper it's not as bad as it could have been. First, I'm quite happy not to be facing either Arsenal or Bayern Munich, which I think are the two other teams in Europe right now who are, above the rest. I think our draw in the first group is actually manageable, I guess. Barcelona is always a tough one, but we kind of have their numbers in recent years. Plus, we're playing them in the Parc des Princes. Man City is a little bit of a wild card. Obviously, they've changed coach and it's no longer Guardiola. Maresca has taken over. The first games that they play, honestly, have been less than impressive. So I watched some of the Community Shield that they played against Arsenal, and in which they got trounced 3-0 by Arsenal. And honestly, it feels like a team who's got a lot of work to do ahead of them. They've also renewed the squad a lot. There's been a lot of players moving out. Rodri, Bernardo Silva, and some of the substitutes in Savinho and Marmoush recently. And at the same time, player coming in as well. So I think it could take some time to click. I'm a bit fearful, if I'm honest, of Maresca, because I remember the final of the Club World Cup, and I know that he's a good coach who, on one game, can summon something that might be difficult for us. But I think on paper, we go to the Etihad as favourites, and it's not it's definitely an easier game away than going to the Emirates or going to the Allianz Arena in Munich. So could have been worse, honestly could have been worse. On the second level, AS Roma and Aston Villa. Aston Villa, again, we just played them in the Super Cup. I think before the draw started, we had essentially 1/3 chances of drawing them. So it happened. No surprises there. A good coach as well in Unai Emery, who can always create some stuff. But I think the squad has been renewed so much over the summer that there too, it might take them a time to actually click and manage to create something. We'll have to see. It depends as well. We don't know exactly when we're going to be playing them. I think that's the next round of information that we don't have as I'm recording this. So maybe it's a game that's we'd be well positioned to play as early in the group phase as possible. Villa Park, it's not an easy one though, in terms of stadium and atmosphere and so on. We know when we played there 2 years ago in the Champions League in the knockout rounds, it almost went pear-shaped for us. So we have to be careful. We kind of know what to expect there, but it's not going to be an easy game for sure. AS Roma, also dangerous opponent. I think probably a little bit undervalued by a lot of fans. They're a really good team. They just put 4 past Fiorentina on the opening of the Serie A. They've got a squad which has talent at every position. They've got a great goalkeeper. They've got Manu Kone in midfield. They just brought in Rodrigo Mora to play with Dybala as in this sort of false 9/number 10 position. There's a lot of talent. They're a team which has been pretty consistent last season as well. Mercato isn't over, and it's not entirely impossible to see 1 or 2 of their players getting sold. But I honestly don't think it's very likely. So it's gonna be a tough opponent. We're playing them at home in the Parc des Princes, which should make things easier for us. But it's definitely the sort of opponent that we need to go in at full strength against, and we can't really be expecting an easy game from them. Third tier, so we're playing Galatasaray in the Parc des Princes. Very happy when we're playing a Turkish team to be playing them at home and not to have to go to Turkey. I think that's always a tricky trip to go to Istanbul. So we're playing them in the Parc des Princes. That's way better. It's a solid team as well, Galatasaray. We've seen yesterday Fenerbahce take out Lyon in the qualifying round for the Champions League. They are above Fenerbahce, so they're to danger. Like not an easy game and not an easy squad to face. And I think obviously. They've been in the Champions League pretty consistently the past few years. It's a team which is still largely organized around Osimhen, who's heads and shoulders above the rest and is really like their superstar. But we know, I think last season they had a good result against Liverpool. So it's really not impossible. They've got like quality players. Gundogan is still in there. Lucas Torreira is still in there. Leroy Sané is still in there. So there's a sort of like, players who've dropped down from elite European clubs. But on one game, it's a dangerous one. So yeah, we'll need to be careful about this one, but playing it at home makes it slightly easier. Other opponents we're facing in the third tier, Villarreal, honestly, like for tier 3, it feels complicated. It feels like we could have had an easier draw there. Villarreal, that's... it's like last season when we had to play Sporting and Bilbao. It's teams where on paper we are above them, but at their place on one night with the crowd, the atmosphere, people get going, it becomes a hard game. Like anything can happen there, and it's not an easy one. They also have quality players, especially Mikotadze as number 9. He might be leaving between now and the end of the Mercato. I know he's been talked about in a couple of different scenarios. Maybe, if Barcelona wants to get a number 9, if Atletico Madrid sell Julian Alvarez. There's a couple of places who could make a play for him in the last moments of the Mercato. For now, he's still there, and yeah, it's not going to be an easy one. We never played in Villarreal, actually, in an actual competition, so it's a first for PSG, which is nice. It's nice to get some new games once in a while. So it's going to be an interesting one, and definitely for tier 3, not the easiest draw we could have gotten. And then finally, tier 4, so supposedly the weakest teams, Bratislava in the Parc des Princes. Not gonna lie, I don't know a lot about Bratislava. It's supposed to be an easy opponent for us, especially at home. We'll need to be professional about it. But yeah, at least we're playing them at home, because for me, the first year, I always worry a little bit about us having to go play in weird places. So, the weird game in Norway to be played early January, or the weird game in Azerbaijan that you have to travel crazy amount of times for when you're playing every 3 days in November. Those things are never as easy as they look on paper just because of that. So playing Bratislava at home, very happy about that. And then the second club of the first tier, not the easy one, Como from Italy. That's the club of Fabregas, who's the coach. They're obviously one of the up-and-coming clubs in Italy, playing a really interesting football. They've got some really interesting young talent and underappreciated talent. They've got one of my my fave players right now in Nico Paz, who I would have loved to see come under and play under a PSG jersey. They had I actually I caught some of their opening game in Serie A last weekend against Udinese. They drew 1-1 and it wasn't such an impressive game. So I'm not gonna lie and say hey, this is facing Inter or something like this. It's still a team who doesn't have much experience at this level, who they're gonna be discovering the Champions League. They've got a lot of young players. They had a really good alchemy over last season, but open question marks as to whether they're gonna manage to carry that into a new season. So not an easy game for sure. I think at tier 4 you hope for easier teams than that. But yeah, it is what it is. We'll have to make do with it. So I think in the end, for me, that's the overall verdict on the draw. It's not the hardest it could have been, but it's also probably not as easy as the initial read that people give on it. I think at every tiers, we've got tough opponents and opponents who, on one game, in one night, can really create something that would be difficult for us. I think on paper, there's no opponent and there's no game that we're not going to go in as favorites. But at the same time, everyone wants to beat PSG. We're double champions of Europe. So everyone, especially in their own stadium, will want to see us fail. So it's gonna be a tough one. We're gonna have to be at full strength on every game. We're gonna have to come in to every game with the absolute best that we can give. But hopefully, like, it's also a draw that, like, we should be okay with in the end. Yeah, it still feels that all of those teams we should be able to beat. I'm not as fearful of what we had last season, of kind of like the mass injuries in our players being out of form all the way till November, December. So it feels like for a lot of games we might be able to go into them with a little bit more consistency in terms of where we are physically and where we are as a squad. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll have to take games one after the other, see what order we're going to be playing them in, because I think it's going to be really important. And, you know, if we can play teams like Man City or teams like Aston Villa, who had a lot of movement over the summer, or like coach changes early on in the competition, I think we'll be better served for it. But yeah, ultimately, like, no, also, like, not go to Aston Villa in January could, like, you know, British weather being what it is, could be a tricky one. Like, we'll see, but on paper it's a doable one. It's probably, I would say, like, slightly easier than what we had last season, but there's also a world in which all of those opponents are, like, you know, generate a good dynamic for themselves in this early part of the season, and all of a sudden all of them look like tough opponents when we end up facing them. So it could go either way on that. We'll have to keep an eye out on their performance and how they do in their respective national leagues and in the games that they have to play in the Champions League before facing us. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. There's lots of clashes that personally I'm excited about. Annoyed to play Barcelona again. Really could have done without this one. Man City, yeah, it's an okay one. I would have preferred something else, but it's okay. We can play them. It's not drama. Roma is going to be really interesting. I think, like, you know, it's a team that we haven't really played that often recently, and it's, you know, it's a team that has some really interesting players. So it is something for us. Aston Villa would have done without. Villarreal is going to be interesting. That's a nice one. And Como, I think it's going to be really interesting as well, depending on how they start their season and how things click within their squad. But just to see Nico Paz against us, I'm very excited about this one. So yeah, some cool games. Let me know what you think in the comments if you made it so far. What do you make of this draw? Are you worried? Are you excited? Do you think it's easy? Do you think it's hard? Let me know. As always, if you made it this far into the video, drop a like on the video. It massively helps to get more people to see it. We want to have, you know, more folks to join our little tribe of English-speaking PSG fans. Subscribe to the channel as well. If you're new, if you've been watching this, don't miss another episode. Subscribe to the channel, doesn't cost anything as well. And as always, for the three-peat in the Champions League, because that's what we're talking about this season, ici c'est Paris!